Hello Internet, welcome to Tromsø Twilight, the channel where I, Vincent, speak into the digital abyss about books, movies, music that I find interesting, that I enjoy, or a combination of the two. And today I would like to speak about a book that I both found interesting and enjoyed. This book is Look at Our Holes, which is a collection edited by Juan Valencia. Juan Valencia is also known on YouTube as Plagued by Visions. He has a channel where he talks about transgressive literature and horror, especially literature in general. He has an absolutely excellent video essay about obscenity, Marquis de Sade, Peter Sotos, which I'll link to in the description. I will also link to his video about this book and how you can get it. It is a fundraiser for the Kukapa people. I guess I'm saying that wrong, but these are a group of people who have for a very, very long time lived in the mountains between the USA and Mexico. They're an indigenous people that Juan has come to know some of them personally, and he's very moved by their plight. So he wrote a very interesting introduction to this book about this environment and the people who live there, and how this book is a kind of paradoxical attempt to give help from the strangest place, that our interest in grotesque and disturbing fiction could actually lead to something beneficial or helpful for these people who, due to capitalism, environmental disaster, colonialism, live in a very precarious situation today. I should also mention that the concept for the book came from Valerie Compex, and she wrote a text at the end of the book. So I thought what I would do is just say up front that I enjoyed the collection a great deal, recommend it if you like contemporary short fiction, especially with a kind of grotesque or transgressive bent. And I thought I would go through the individual text, just say something brief about each one for those who've read the book or for those who are interested in hearing my opinion on it. So that's what I'm going to do. I've got my notebook here because I wouldn't be able to remember it all otherwise. The collection is broken up into four sections: disquieting holes, neurotic holes, absurd holes, and brutal holes. I would say that absurd holes and brutal holes, you get what comes on the description. I would argue that disquieting holes and neurotic holes, that the difference between those stories or those contributions, some of them could have landed in either section, in my opinion. It opens with Josh Simmons, a thing called Working Its Way Through Your Guts, which is actually a kind of comic strip. Really great drawings, and the story of the comic strip is kind of about what appears to be maybe medieval people who are guarding a kind of wooden fort town, and in the night one of the women returns from the forest somehow changed, and whether it's like a situation of like something supernatural or whether it's aliens or what is never explored, this little comic strip is very much like the opening of a horror film. And in that way, it's also a good opening to a collection of kind of strange vignettes. The second contribution is a short story by Brendan Vedito. It's called Descend as Directed. And this is a weird, surreal exploration of the internet, medicine, and maybe insanity. It's about a kind of drug that kind of moves people through different states or conditions. This was actually one of my favorites. It's very difficult to summarize or explain, but really, really disquieting, as Juan says in the description, and bizarre. I really loved it. The one after that is by MAJ, who I believe also is a YouTuber. This story is called Ink and Void. It's a story about tattoos taking on a kind of occult significance and a sort of supernatural power. I would say, unfortunately, that this is probably the weakest in the collection. I like the idea a great deal, but I think it's written in in a way that kind of reminds me of fan fiction. And this writer has kind of thrown in every vaguely esoteric thing they could think of, like astrology, essential oils, herbs, the multiverse, geometry, trauma, quantum physics, mathematics, without any depth to any of these. It's like it's just gone out very broadly to create something that's kind of supposed to be spooky or esoteric. I would say this person's writing on the basis of this story has potential, but isn't really quite up to the standards of a lot of the other stories in the collection. The next story is by Regina Garza Mitchell. This is a story called Patterns. It's one of the more subdued, subtle stories in the collection. It's kind of about aging, disintegration, loneliness. It's a very sad, strange story. I was impressed by it. Then you have the editor, Juan Valencia's contribution. This is a poem called The Gaze of Imperial Valley, which seems to me to kind of be contrasting life in a very working class, closeted, homophobic area with the more kind of cosmopolitan, open, and middle class environment of San Diego, which is nearby. It's a very sad, very lonely description of a life kind of lived in the fringes of a very heteronormative, homophobic community. And it really reminded me of when I was in a completely different part of America a couple of years back in Seattle. And in Seattle, there were pride flags everywhere, and people had pronoun badges on, and they had all of those, like in this house we believe love is love all over the place. And it was like this sort of super what appeared to be a very tolerant, liberal kind of enclave. And then I drove a little way out into the countryside, not even very far, and then there were houses that had been turned into Trump campaign posters, and there were Blue Lives Matter things around, and just this sense of like these places in America being totally clashing in terms of their attitudes towards people, sexuality, religion, politics. It made me think of all of this. I like the poem a lot. I will say though that maybe it's stretching the concept, like it wasn't really about a whole, unless the town is a whole, or I guess, maybe it's just obliquely referencing like sexual practices, so in that way about holes, but hey, it's Juan's collection, so he can write what the fuck he wants. The next text, Mike Thorne, Hell is a False Abyss. This is maybe the text that's closest to traditional weird fiction. It's kind of a strange, kind of transcendental or cosmic horror about a guy who descends into a hole, and in that hole kind of glimpses what God truly is. You could compare it to Lovecraft, but I would maybe compare it more to Robert Aickman or Arthur Machen. These kind of very recognized and respected writers of weird fiction. I honestly think it's up to that standard. I really love this story. Following that, there's a little bit more of an absurd story called Sixie by Elle Nash, which is a kind of psychosexual story about a woman with 6 fingers. This, I think, is in a genre that I discovered while I was reading this collection, which is these sort of, it's like this kind of sex, body, horror, surreality stories that are kind of comic but disturbing. There's several of these in the collection. Following that, there's a story by Max Rostano called Lapses. This is very fragmented. It reminded me maybe a little of David Lynch, especially Lost Highway. There's a kind of disembodied voice on a phone that I guess gave me that kind of association. It's very poetic, as I say, very fragmented. To be honest, I might have to read it again to be able to say anything more about it than that. Then Charlene Elsby, a story called There's a Hole in My Soul Where the Devil Got In, Just Like That. I want to read the opening of this story because I think it's just brilliant. I used to think that death was the limit of suffering. that to live is to engage in the equilibrium of the active and the passive, that the aspect of passivity makes us vulnerable to suffering, and that the aspect of the diapole could be eliminated with the impulse of life, élan vital. But that was a trick of the devil. He made it seem to us as if there exists a dependence between two things that appear in constant conjunction, and that to eliminate one is to eliminate the other. And in doing so, he made me believe that if I took away life, that death would go with it. A logical trap. The moment I died, I realized that the devil had done me dirty, that eliminating life hands death the reins. Well, I think that's just an incredible opening page. The story goes on to be a kind of bleak and disjointed account of a murder. Morel Herder follows this with What Am I When I Am No Longer Whole? This is the second story in that genre I mentioned of a kind of weird psychosexual body horror. But this one is also about lack, hunger, longing. It's a little less humorous. Then Rowan Smith, Digging a Hole for the Children. This is the first one in the section called Absurd Holes, and it starts with a very simple concept that a guy one night gets up and he starts digging a hole for the children in the garden. And his wife comes and says, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm digging a hole for the children." And she gets her dad, he comes and he says, either get in the hole, help me dig, or fuck off, I'm digging a hole for the children. As the story goes on, it takes this to such extremes with this digging of this hole that you start to wonder whether you even understood the concept in the first place, and it goes from being comic to being kind of dreamlike and bizarre. After that, there's a story from Alexandra Chaloner, who is also known on YouTube as Bookubus, a horror YouTuber. This story is called The Live Stream. It's about a woman with two vaginas. It's written like a blog post. It works very, very well. Then you have Blessed is the Hole by Jared Sani. This is another of my favorites. Absolutely excellent. It's like this weird satirical story with two voices set up against each other. It kind of explores this kind of unholy alliance between the kind of brash American capitalist and the more kind of uptight, refined religious zealot. Really like this a great deal. Following that, there's a short piece by somebody called Max Booth the Third, which is called Three Eggs. It's a comic text, also a little bit about the internet. I thought it was just okay. And then there's a story from Alyssa Nutting, who is famous for writing Tampa, a book that I have recommended to me often, but still have not yet read. I want to read it. This story is called Eternity Hole. It's a kind of ghost story, and it reminded me, if anything, of Douglas Copeland's short stories that he often includes in his longer novels. I felt like it could have been a story that one of the characters in Generation A had made up. Then there is a piece which is a collaboration between Chris Kelso and Bobby Lafolletta, I guess this is, or La Folletta, the third. The second person is an illustrator. The first is a writer. They do a thing together called Void Heads in this book. It's these kind of weird drawings that remind me of old school 80s and 90s horror zines. There's sort of an implication that there's maybe a kind of narrative in the background. I thought this was like fun to look at, but I didn't like it as much as the initial comic at the beginning. Then you got Paul Curran's text Typophobia. Now, Typophobia is a text that I think many people would really like. It's this kind of particular type of writing that I come across now and again, that's a sort of combination of transgressive fiction and semiotics, where it's deliberately extremely brutal, but at the same time kind of calls into question whether the words actually refer to the acts or ideas that you generally think those words would refer to. So, for example, murder. Is it actually murder, or is it just the word murder? Is it just the letters? I would understand why Juan would like this based on some of his other videos that describe similar texts. It also reminds me a little bit of the writing of Ben Marcus. Um, I'm going to be honest and say I could not stand this story. But it's because it's a taste thing. I really don't like this type of thing. But I think if you do like it, this is probably actually a very good example of it. Then there's a story called Smile Elfrida, which is originally by Martin Verdes, and it's translated by the editor, Juan. This is a really disturbing story of childhood, family, desire, power, and disfigurement. I won't say more about it than that in case you're going to read it, but oh, it's so good. It's so good, and I think the translation's really good. Then there's a story called Behavioral Sync by Tom Over. This is actually an extract from a novel. Very weird. It's sort of like, it's kind of this weird world building thing where each character you meet or each thing that happens is like totally unpredictable, slightly absurd, violent, weird, unsettling. I couldn't decide whether it reminded me of like a cartoon, a computer game, or a nightmare. I'd kind of be interested to read more of Tom Over to see whether this kind can be sustained over longer fiction because it's an extract. It works well as an extract, but I was like, will this work with this like just continual stream of weirdness? I'd be interested to find out. The last text is from Valerie Compex. This is really different from a lot of the other texts in the book, and she also mentions this. It's called Valerie and the Violation of the Seven Holes, and it's a story about menstruation, medical care, structural racism within the health system, misogyny, sexual assault, and it's autobiographical. It's like a short memoir based on her relationship to her body and the health issues that she's encountered. I thought it was really powerful and a great way to close what is basically an excellent collection. That's my discussion of this anthology. I really enjoyed it. If you found this interesting, get it because you're supporting independent creators and you're also supporting an indigenous community. If you buy it directly from the editor, you'll probably get it signed. If you don't want to read it, I hope that you at least enjoyed this discussion and maybe you'll be interested to read some of the authors that I mentioned. If you have read it, please jump in the comments. Let me know what you thought. Did you totally disagree with me? Did you have different favorites? I'd love to talk to you about it. That's it from me for now. Take care.